Okay, hi, Lily, Lisa. Nice to have you here. Thanks to the East West Publishing House, Istok for holding this space for us. My name's Yana. I'm a mom of a baby girl who is a year and 4 months old. Not sure if that classifies as a baby or as a toddler, but I still think she's my baby. So I had a really healthy pregnancy and I gave birth at home. I followed the advice from Lily's Real Food for Pregnancy book, which was incredible. Um, Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, cool. Then some of the stuff which I also followed during my pregnancy were some of the fertility awareness techniques that Lisa was sharing. I didn't have any issues whatsoever. It was absolutely flawless. I loved being pregnant. And I thought it only makes sense to make the information that you wrote about in the books available to other women and men who are on their fertility journey. And this is why I decided to contact the East West Publishing House and make sure that we can translate the book in Bulgarian. Um, So the first question would be, do you guys know anything about Bulgaria? Have you been here? Have you visited? Or is there anything that pops your mind whenever you hear the country's name?
I'm unfortunately pretty ignorant, but I would love to learn more, Lily. I don't know if you know more than I do.
No, I have actually never been to Europe, sadly. So no, I'm blind to the wonders of Bulgaria and really any European countries.
Okay, actually you're not, to be honest, because you've written about the Mediterranean diet. We are just north of Greece. We share a border. We don't have a coast on the Mediterranean, so we don't have the access to the amazing seafood that it offers. But we're still kind of in this pool of countries, let's say. So we do share lots of common traits when it comes to the cuisine, the dishes that we eat. And the first thing I want to talk about is Bulgarian yogurt. So that's something that we really take our pride in. At the beginning of the 20th century, a Bulgarian professor managed to patent one of the strains of bacteria that was used to produce that kind of yogurt. It has been patented. It's called Lactobacillus bulgaricus. Um, it's one of the most amazing foods that we have here. I think it's featured in many other countries in the Mediterranean pool as well, but it's specifically, I would say, present in our geographic area. And since it's yogurt, as you might guess, it's really healthy. It's fermented. It's fatty. It's rich in protein and all kinds of nutrients. Sadly, there's this tendency that people see, at least in our country, um, where most of the products sold are skimmed of fat and they're low fat. Um, the normal, regular, fatty, nutritious yogurt is not so, I mean, it is common, but people still prefer to go to the low fat options. So the first question would be, um, is it a good idea to swap the traditional nutrient dense fatty dairy products for their low fat options?
I'll take on that question. I mean, I know in some regions of the world they'll skim the dairy fat to use for other items like butter and cream and maybe soured cream or creme fraiche or something, and then have skimmed yogurt. And as long as you're consuming the fat component elsewhere, it's fine. Although, of course, I think full fat yogurt is a lot more delicious. But when people are completely like skimming off all the cream and discarding it, not or choosing not to consume it whatsoever, it can be kind of a nutritional issue because there are some nutrients in the fatty part of dairy that's actually highly beneficial. So all your vitamins A, D, E, and K, the fat soluble vitamins are in that fatty component. You also need fat and cholesterol for building your sex hormones, your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. So if dairy fat contributed somewhat substantially to your fat intake and you're no longer consuming it, and now your diet is low in fat, we can start to see issues with hormone production. And we do see that in both men and women. So you put men on a low-fat diet, their testosterone plummets. You put women on a low-fat diet, their progesterone and estrogen plummets as well, and you can start to have menstrual cycle issues pop up. Some women even lose their periods if they go too low in fat. So it's my opinion, and Lisa and I are in agreement here that you don't take all the fat out of your diet. I think the many governments' dietary guidelines on restricting fat intake are misguided at best and harmful at worst, especially when it comes to fertility. So I would recommend still consuming your dairy fat. If you're a consumer of dairy products, eat the fat as well. If it's not in your yogurt, I would hope that you're having butter and cream and cheeses and other things that still have the fat in it.
Yeah, so you mentioned it in your book that fat is bad is kind of something that we have to leave behind in the sense that, my mom, for example, she believes that high fat, like foods which are rich in fat cause problems with your heart and cardiovascular system and so on, where, as people can read in your book, that's not typically the case. It's a combination of other stuff. Yeah, so moving on from the fats, then we have to address protein because that's the usual thing which pops up, especially in the newest trendy diets or dietary regimes that people follow. We have currently, I think the ketogenic diet is pretty popular in the country. Many people are following it. There's also the vegan, the carnivore, those extreme cases where people leave completely separate types of food and nutrients. Um, you mentioned it in your book, but can you summarize for us how should the protein requirements be updated? What's the minimum amount that we need as women and as men? If you know what the exact numbers, what do we need to eat to sustain a healthy lifestyle?
Yeah, I could speak to that one as well. I'm not sure if your dietary guidelines are much different from the US, but in the US, like the official guidance is zero point 0.8 grams per kilo of body weight. And that translates to about like 10% of calories coming from protein, which is really low. Um, and that's really a guideline that was set with kind of limited information. We had a limited way of assessing how much protein the human body required. So that's an amount that will keep you alive, but might not support optimal function and optimal health, especially now as we have like so much expanded data on all these individual amino acids. And we're looking at protein as more than just a source of nitrogen, which was how it was looked at, in the 80s and 90s. So I'd say at minimum, I would aim for 1.2 grams per kilo. Some need to go all the way up to like 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Especially athletes tend to need a lot more. Like I wouldn't go less than 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. And that would translate roughly, for an optimal amount of protein, I would say, 20 to even 35% of calories coming from protein. That's just a different way of looking at it. Can be really helpful. But I tend to like to go by body weight because that's just a little bit more precise way of measuring it. And we do for Lisa and I, we've seen a lot of changes for our own clients in their fertility, their menstrual cycle regularity. Of course, for me in pregnancy, we know protein needs also increase in pregnancy as well. We see better postpartum recovery when we ramp up the protein a little higher. And also, your protein-rich foods tend to be the ones that have the most vitamins and minerals in them. They're the most nutrient-dense food sources. So you can run into some issues if people are on a low protein diet. Now, somebody who's eating carnivore is probably on a pretty high protein diet. Somebody who's eating a ketogenic diet, they're usually eating a bit more protein, but it depends on how you do it. And then a vegan or vegetarian diet, often they're getting a lot less protein, and it's lower quality protein sources that don't have as good of a balance of amino acids as animal foods. So you can run into some issues with protein inadequacy and really need to put extra attention in vegan and vegetarian cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're describing it in greater detail in the book, especially when it comes to supplements, which is the next thing I think we should mention. Many people rely on supplementing instead of getting the most, like the highest variety of nutrients from their diet, which is actually strange since we are living in a very sunny country and we still see a huge amount of vitamin D deficiency, of magnesium deficiency, which I think is the case all over the world. It's not specific to our region. Um, are supplements needed? Maybe the question is, do people really need to take supplements or they need to address some other lifestyle factors?
Okay. Yeah. Um, I think it's an interesting question because I feel like in an ideal world where our food supply was just incredible, if we had the nutrient-rich soil, like if everything was perfect, theoretically, maybe we wouldn't need supplementation. But I think what we see when we work with clients, especially clients who are trying to conceive, clients who are trying to support optimal menstrual cycle health, that first of all, their diets typically aren't optimal, which is one of the reasons why we wrote the book. So most people, even if they're trying to eat healthy, I mean, if you ask, 50 different people, they'll tell you that they eat healthy, but their definitions of what that means is very different. And we've even spoken about some of the different ways that people are eating, the different types of diets that they're having. So I think generally speaking, when I'm working with regular women, there's an opportunity for improvement in the diet. But even if the diet is perfect, if that's even a thing, we're often dealing with other issues. If somebody has issues with thyroid function, if someone has issues with their menstrual cycle, for example, women with PCOS tend to be deficient in magnesium and vitamin D, just like you mentioned, as well as other nutrients. So I feel like we would want to look at the specific situation, what's happening with that person, and then optimize the diet as much as possible. And the supplements really should fill in the gaps or address any of the potential issues that arise. So I feel like when people approach supplements, at least in my experience, it's like they don't necessarily want to do the diet or the lifestyle improvements because that's harder, takes longer. So they kind of want that magical supplement that's going to go ahead and fix everything. And what I found is even if you do add the magical supplements, if you don't have the solid foundation of nutrition and you haven't addressed those lifestyle factors, the supplements can help to a certain extent, but you're not going to get that fullest, whatever result you're looking for, you're not really going to get that full extent of it. So I certainly see the need for supplementation, but specific related to exactly what's going on, and in conjunction with nutrition as well as the lifestyle factor piece.
Yeah. Yeah, nutrients don't work in isolation, as you've said multiple times throughout the book. So you can't pop a pill of magnesium and expect for it to act as if you're consuming it with the rest of the stuff that your body needs. Now that you mentioned the thyroid, actually, that was the next topic I wanted to talk about quickly. So this is not specifically about Bulgaria, but in this part of the world, let's say this part of Europe, we are seeing skyrocketing rates of thyroid issues, and some people claim it could be due to the Chernobyl explosion, which happened in the past. We are seeing also skyrocketing C-section rates. So there's up to 75%, 65, 75% of births in the last 2 years are via C-sections. And it's mostly due to reasons such as, the baby is too big, or you are like your body is not gonna be able to deliver the baby. You're having lots of hormonal imbalances and so on. Um, what would be your advice as a fertility awareness master for people who struggle with their hormones? Like, what are the first steps towards getting the hormonal health back together?
I feel like there's a lot of parts to that question. Um, the the thyroid issue, I mean, that's a pretty big topic. And of course, if it could be related to the toxins associated with the Chernobyl issue, like that's a pretty big um, a pretty big factor. So in terms of the thyroid, I think that it's important for we have a section on thyroid in the book, and it's important for I think people to recognize the way that the thyroid functions in the body. And I think that what I've learned over the years is that with thyroid, it's not just simply the thyroid gland itself and the hormones that it's putting out. It's how your body is utilizing those hormones, and the optimal function of the thyroid and the optimal kind of distribution of those hormones is highly dependent on a wide variety of nutrients that support the production of thyroid hormone, as well as even the conversion of, T4 to T3. And it's related to stress, lifestyle factors, key nutrients, iodine, zinc, selenium, vitamin D, vitamin A, even vitamin C, they all play a role in supporting thyroid function and how that thyroid hormone is utilized in the body. So I think that even with that challenge and with that toxin exposure, there's certainly a possibility for people to kind of optimize their nutrient intake, potentially opt for targeted supplementation. And maybe Lily, if you want to talk more to the very complex question around C-sections and the size of the babies and all the things.
Yeah, I don't know what the origin of the spike in C-sections is. I know in some countries, like Brazil, for example, is really high. And so there's almost just like a provider preference for it's just assumed you'll need a C-section. It's kind of hard to opt out, is my understanding. Sometimes if a baby is showing signs on growth scans of growing larger than expected, then you'll have more provider pressure into C-sections, and with rates of gestational diabetes going up, high maternal blood sugar is one potential factor for a baby growing larger than expected. Likewise, maternal weight at the start of pregnancy being higher or weight gain during pregnancy being higher than expected, those are like the three trifecta of factors that tend to influence that the most. So if that's a phenomenon that's happening over there, I'm not sure, although we do know gestational diabetes as a whole does seem to be rising worldwide. That could be playing into it. It still just sounds like that C-section rate is astoundingly high. I mean, even in the US, we're at maybe 30 to 35% of births, depending on um, where you decide to give birth. Some hospitals, some states are worse than others. So there's multiple factors in there. I don't know that that C-section rate can be justified. That's wild to me.
It is wild, and it's also kind of concerning, I would say. So at least in Bulgaria, we don't support home births, so it's not fully illegal to do it, but you can't have any medical professionals with you. You have to be on your own. Um,
Interesting.
yeah,
Not
and
even
it's
midwives?
no, nothing. You're
Wow.
if you invite a medical professional, or if there is a medical professional at the time of birth, and it becomes known about, like if somebody finds out, then the medical professional could lose their license. So
Wow.
yeah, it's a strange situation, I would say.
Can
So
I just chime in for a second that I had three children all at home, but in Canada it's different because not only can you choose to have a midwife attend a birth at home, but in it's covered to a point. So I didn't have to even pay out of pocket for that. So it sounds like in Bulgaria they've really decided that birth is a medical emergency that requires intervention, and they've completely ignored the fact that it is a natural like obviously issues can arise, medical emergencies can arise, but birth itself is not inherently a medical emergency. And I feel like that sheds a lot of light as to why they just have full control. So if the providers have full control, then they can put all these rules in place to kind of force women to go that route. Because as Lily said, that's just it doesn't even make logical sense. 3 out of 4 women do not need a C-section.
Yeah, that's outrageous. Lisa and I
yeah,
both had we had our babies at home too, so we're on your side.
Yep. We're hippies.
yeah, it was really wild to be honest. But I think we need to raise awareness and we need to shed light on the fact that the female body is perfectly well designed to handle such a natural physiological process.
Can I share
Um,
something else? Because I'm like a little bit incensed about the 75% thing. So when I decided to, like, when I told my husband that this was what's going to happen, like, he wasn't on board. He was like, what do you mean? Like, hospital, are you crazy? Like, right? And so the midwives actually had an information night at the time, and he came and he was able to ask all their questions. And I mean, it's not what people think when they hear it, especially if this is not something that they've done or they've thought about. These are medical professionals that have the same degree of training as nurses, in that same situation. And they described all of the different precautions that they take. And in my case, it wasn't guaranteed that I would be able to birth at home. I had to actually pass a certain number of weeks. I think it was 37 weeks. I don't remember. And, there were certain things that they would do just to make sure that I was actually a candidate for a home birth. So I just wanted to share that because it's useful for people to hear that, especially in a country that is just not there in terms of their policies.
yeah, I was actually going to ask you for some advice on how can we raise the awareness? How can we bring this to more people? What how to say? Um, do you have any idea what can we do? How can we inform more people about this? About fertility awareness in general, about home births and unlearning all the stuff that we actually have to unlearn and go back and trust our bodies.
I feel like the midwives would need to be acknowledged. There would have to be support legislatively for midwives to be able to conduct home births. And I mean, given that there's countries that do this, many, it would just involve someone who's actually interested because I think from my like if I was in a country and we didn't have something like that, you could easily I would think, maybe I'm naive, but you could easily make connections in other countries that are doing it and make a point of learning about those right, like what they're doing and then model whatever you're doing based on the best practices. But that's a big like uphill battle. In terms of raising awareness about fertility awareness and those types of things, I mean, it's a struggle everywhere because I would say it's interesting. I've been in this field for over 2 decades and I've seen the growth of interest. I've seen the number of women who are interested in doing this work really explode. And with the internet, this information is now widely available, whereas back in my day, you had to go to the library to find a book, right? It's like it was just not available everywhere. But while we've made such great strides in this direction, it's still very niche. It's still relatively unknown. And I would say that the average woman still has no idea. So, in terms of raising awareness, I mean, I think first and foremost, if one of the ways that I look at this is that if we wait around for our education systems, if we wait around for these different organizations to kind of enlighten us, then we're going to be waiting for a really long time. So I've always taken the perspective that it's really up to us. It's up to individuals who are interested in it. So for anyone who's listening to this and is really inspired and really feels this affinity to fertility awareness education, I think it's really important for you to share information about it in whatever way that is for you. So whether that's sharing information with your friends, your family, your healthcare practitioners, your children, your nieces, nephews, whatever the case, I think that's really important. It's been really interesting to see. I'm like one person who gave me a microphone, and I've written, books about this now, and that has actually made a significant difference because the field is pretty small. So I do think that initially the grassroots application and women just making noise about this is the first step, and then once that movement gets going, then you can look at legislation and trying to get into schools and things like that. But that certainly is not my calling.
Yep. Yeah, we just need to talk about it and talk about it with everybody and try to reach to as many people as we can. And I do hope that your book reaches everyone who needs it. It helps men and women both on their fertility journey, and we see lots of new healthy babies being born. And yeah, I just hope everything gets better in the long term. Thank you very much for this call. It has been absolutely amazing.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us, and thank you for taking the lead on translating Real Food for Fertility. We know that was a rather huge book to translate. We apologize for the very long word count, but thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to translating Real Food for Pregnancy. And I do hope that we can also talk about the fifth vital sign at some point.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah. Thank you.